need assistance. They already had assistance. You made them take it on October 13th.
No, no.
So I don't see how those two clauses. I mean, you made that point when Mr. Issa was questioning you. They already had assistance. You made them take $15 million
No, I mean,
October
if they had
13th.
invoked the MAC against our advice and then they had to be rescued in a Sunday afternoon operation at great cost and risk, that would hardly be a commendation for the management's quality.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
The gentlewoman from California, Congresswoman Speier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bernanke, what went into your decision to allow Lehman's to fail?
It bears very much on this discussion. The problem was that we were unable to save it within legal means. We had made every attempt to do so, but we had no legal authority to inject capital at that time, and we had no legal authority to compel Mr. Lewis, for that matter, to buy Lehman, and therefore we had no way to allow it to prevent the failure. If we could have done so, we would have done so.
Well, you did, in fact, save AIG that same weekend.
The conditions were quite different because there the financial products division was part of a much larger insurance company which could provide the collateral for a loan to replace the loss of liquidity that that financial company was experiencing. So it was a very different situation.
So if you had TARP funds at the time, you would have saved Lehman Brothers as well?
I believe we would have at least given that a try.
Let me ask you about the process that you went through in determining to give Bank of America $15 billion in October. Why that number? How did you come up with that number?
I did not develop that number. I'm sure it was related to the size of the firm and its capital ratios.
Who came up with that number?
I'm not certain. It was probably Treasury, but I'm not certain.
You're not certain who came up with the number?
No.
And so the $10 billion that was given to Merrill Lynch at a subsequent point in time, you don't know who came up with that number either?
This was TARP money, and this was the Treasury's responsibility.
And you didn't have conversations with Mr. Paulson about this?
I don't recall.
As I look at it, it appears that if you take the $15 billion that B of A got in October, the $15 billion that Merrill got, the $20 billion that was given to the B of A in January, that pretty much pays for what the B of A paid for Merrill. So did the American people basically subsidize the purchase of Merrill Lynch to B of A?
No, the American people made a capital investment on which they are currently getting dividends, and which I expect they'll be fully repaid.
The obligation to inform the OCC and SEC, do you believe you have an obligation to inform them about any erratic conditions of companies that you come in contact with?
Depends what kind of company it is. This was a bank, and therefore the most pressing communication were with the bank regulators, the FDIC and the OCC, which we did inform, and I personally informed both Mr. Dugan and Ms. Baer about the situation, and we had them on conference calls to discuss the situation in some detail. The SEC is not directly a supervisor of Bank of America.
It may not be a supervisor, but certainly the way they engage in their business relative to stock is of interest to the SEC, is it not?
Repeat the question, please.
Doesn't the SEC have a role in evaluating the bank as it relates to its investor relations?
Yes, but that's the Bank of America's responsibility, not ours.
Well, we're all one government, aren't we?
Well, we all have our spheres of responsibility as well.
So you didn't believe you had a responsibility to inform the SEC?
Well, we were dealing with an emergency situation, and our focus was on the agencies that were most relevant to the situation. That was the banking regulators. So that's who we focused on.
But some of these emails would suggest that there was an act of interest in not telling the SEC certain things, and that they were finding out through other means. I mean, this is a government. We're all part of the government. It's really our responsibility to work together. So it appears that someone was trying to hide the ball, and I'm just trying to understand why.
There was just no priority to go to the SEC, but we did disclose to them what was going on, and I think it's appropriate for them to know, broadly speaking, what was going on.
Do you believe that the Bank of America had a responsibility to inform its shareholders and the American people that it was going to get another injection of $20 billion from the United States government
That was
earlier than January 20th?
that was Bank of America's decision and their counsel.
I'm
That
just
was the-
asking you.
I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you.
Do you think you had a responsibility as the head of the Fed to tell the American people that we were going to inject another $20 billion into the Bank of America earlier than January 20th?
My responsibilities are very explicitly set out by the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, which says that after the completion of a deal, we must report within 1 week, which we did.
So you don't think you had any
We
further
followed the law
responsibility?
exactly.
In hindsight, hindsight's always 20/20. Is there anything that you would do differently?
I think it was a very successful transaction. It helped stabilize the financial markets. It put the two companies back on a healthy path. It's protected our economy, and it was a good deal for taxpayers. I think I have nothing that I regret about the whole transaction. I think it was, in fact, a very successful operation overall, and it achieved the public policy objectives that were very important.
I yield back.
Gentlewoman's
Thank you.
time has expired.